Spoiler warning for the ending of Attack on Titan. This video will be primarily talking about the ending of the manga, so if you have not read it, I would click off now, unless you do not care about being spoiled. Attack on Titan is finally ending. After waiting years, the story is finally coming to a close. But with the ending now upon us, there is something that has come up in the community that people are talking about. That being the idea of an anime-only ending, or AOE for short. It's no surprise to anybody that the ending of the manga was very controversial, and even now people are still very split. There's a subsection of people who like the manga ending, and there are others who still hate it. And then there's the group in the middle that recognize its problems but still think that it's pretty good overall. I lay mostly in that camp, but I understand the problems that people have with the ending. But there's been some talk about an AOE because there are some differences between the anime and the manga, and interviews with Isayama and things that he has said that have made people kind of come to the conclusion that the anime will have a different ending than the manga. So, today I want to talk about, will AOT have an anime original ending, and is it actually needed? Now, I think that might sound confusing, but I think that it's important to recognize that just because a lot of people think that an anime-only ending would be better, that maybe it's not. And I think that even if it is quote-unquote anime original, I still think that the majority of the ending will be largely the same, just with some differences here and there. But I also do want to talk about the idea of an anime-only ending and what that may look like just from what we've been given in the anime and everything that we've seen so far. So, let's talk about it. So, as I said, a lot of people have been talking about the interviews with Isayama, bringing up what inspired Attack on Titan, specifically a game called Mudlove, that has apparently had a lot of influence over what Isayama has done with Attack on Titan and may have planned for it if there is going to be an anime original ending. But I want to mostly focus on what we've been given in the anime rather than looking at outside sources. Even though I still think that those are relevant and are important to a certain degree, but I think it's more important to look at the show and what we've been given there. So, the first thing I kind of want to talk about is the big differences between the anime and the manga. So, for one of the bigger ones is the difference between how the first chapter starts and how the first episode of the anime starts. The first chapter, we have the scene with Mikasa saying, see you later, Eren. We see Eren having a dream of Mikasa and her talking to him. But in the anime, it's that weird dream of the Titans. We see the Survey Corps members all lying dead. We see Titans coming in, invading. We see the death of Eren's mother at the hands of the Smiling Titan. And then he just wakes up in a shock, and him and Mikasa asks, why are you crying? Which is also similar in the manga, but the dream is different, so there's already some differences from the very beginning. The other important thing is that now with the release of the finale part 1, or the special, whatever you want to call it, that just released in March, we see that scene again, and it's slightly different. We don't see Aaron's dream, but we see a similar situation to the manga where it's Mikasa talking to him, saying see you later, and then while Aaron isn't like sitting specifically the exact same way as he was in the manga, but the whole situation seems very similar to what's in the manga rather than in the anime. So that kind of... it's weird that they show the beginning again, and it's more closely tied to the manga rather than the anime. And we also... or what they originally showed in the anime. And especially because, like, obviously if they wanted to retcon it or go back and change it, they could. It would be a little bit weird, but it was the beginning of the series, you know, maybe Isayama and Wit and everybody didn't exactly know where everything was going from there, but no, they doubled down, and it's weird to me. It strikes me as odd, but there are some other differences. Another big one is obviously Aaron's Berserker Titan that we see fight Annie at the end of season 1. The Berserker Titan never shows up in the manga. It's just Annie beats him into that house, and then she tries climbing up the wall, and then Mikasa cuts her down. There is no Berserker Titan, or there is no Berserker Aaron Titan that comes in and weakens her and beats her, and then she starts climbing. No, it's just she beats Aaron, she starts climbing, she gets cut down, and then Aaron restrains her, and that whole part is the same, but he's not in that Berserker form. So the Berserker Titan is only in the anime. And the other thing weird about it is the choice of dialogue that he says. He says, I will destroy this world, or something similar to that. Basically foreshadowing what he's doing currently in the anime, but it's weird that he says a line like that while he's in a rage and taking down Annie. So it's another big difference. Another pretty big difference that I noticed is season 3 as a whole, specifically, well, not as a whole, season 3's Uprising arc has probably the most changes and cut content and rearrangement of events compared to the manga. But one thing that kind of sticks out to me is Levi basically forces Historia into becoming queen when explaining their plan about overthrowing the government. And while he kind of does the same thing in the anime, but he gets physical with her. Like, he's grabbing her by like the scruff of her shirt and is kind of like forcing her and telling her it's like, you kind of have no choice, you have to do this. And he goes on into a little monologue or whatever, and that leads to the scene where she does become queen, and she ends up punching him back, because in that little altercation she's like, oh, let go, and he says, if you don't like it, do something, or something similar. But that's where that whole scene comes from. In the anime, it's just kind of played more so as a joke, like, oh, the strongest the strongest soldier is taking a punch from this weak little girl, and he can't really do anything to her because she's the queen now. But there's a lot more context to it in the manga. It's her getting back at him for that and being like, yeah, I'll take this role, but now you're stuck under me. You have to listen to me. And while I don't think that has a whole lot to do with the ending and where things go, I think it's important to point it out just because that is a pretty important scene. It's Levi kind of forcing her and weirdly encouraging her in his own way to become queen and take on this responsibility, and then her stepping into that role. So again, I don't think it has anything major to do with the ending or anything, but I think it is important to point it out. Some other differences come from season 4, and these are some of the bigger ones that kind of point to, will there be an AOE, will there not be? The big one, or I shouldn't say the big one, but one of the big ones is Falco's dream in the beginning of season 4, when he's dragged back into the trenches and the others are trying to like snap him back into his senses. He's mumbling, and he's like, wasn't I just soaring around, like flying, going whoosh, and then he like snaps back into like his reality. So that never happens in the manga. It's just him getting dragged into the trench and then him getting explained, like he has like a minor concussion or whatever, and they like slightly explain what's going on just so that way we as the readers know what's going on. There is no him having a dream of like flying around and being in the air, which at first, when I first saw that, I thought, oh, that's foreshadowing for when he's going to become the Jaw Titan and start flying around near the ending of the battle. But while I still think that is largely what it is, there's a part of me that also thinks that maybe it could be interpreted a different way, and maybe it could mean something different and could be foreshadowing to something different, which I'll get into a little bit later when I talk about some of the possible AOE, or at least my idea of what could happen. But some other stuff, we don't see during the rumbling in the manga. We see there's this parallel between Historia giving birth to her child and then the rumbling basically crushing out the majority of life on the planet. But we don't see that in the anime. And while that's a scene that could just be thrown in to while that is a scene that could just be thrown in to the second part of the finale, I do think that it's kind of weird that they didn't just put it where it is in the manga. Like, if they were going to do it, why didn't they just put it where it was? So that kind of sticks out to me. Another thing is that there are slightly different rumbling scenes. The anime goes a little bit more in depth and shows a little bit more of like specific like instances of like people running from the rumbling and what's happening there, whereas the manga, they show a couple of different places. Like we see presumably Onyankampon's home, we see Marley, we see the I'm blanking on the name of it now, but where the Azumabito people come from, and the equivalent of Japan, I assume, for Attack on Titan. That's getting crushed. We see like just minor panels of people like praying and kind of like not wishing, but just kind of accepting what's about to happen. And then we see like some people getting crushed, and I'm saying that so casually, but it's what we see. But another really big difference that I'm really surprised about that we didn't see in the anime, not really super surprised, but there's a part of the rumbling that is completely cut from the anime. And what it is we see hordes and hordes of people just running from the Colossal Titans, and they're all walking towards this giant cliff edge with like the ocean at the end of it. So we see a lot of people jumping and a lot of people trying to get away, but obviously there's no escape. It's just the Colossal Titans behind them and the cliff in front of them. And so obviously probably not one of the greatest things to be showing on TV. It might be a little bit graphic, but I don't know, in comparison to some of the other things that we've seen in Attack on Titan, that's kind of up in the air. But the bigger thing that strikes me is there's a specific panel in that scene, and I think that this panel is just as iconic, if not more iconic, than Eren saying this is freedom while in the clouds, which we also see in the anime. But we see what's presumably a mother, and she has her baby, and she's getting closer and closer to the cliffside, and obviously there's no escape or anything, but she decides to throw her baby off into the crowd. Not really throw, but like hand off the baby into the crowd while she falls off the edge. And we see people just kind of it's weird to put it this way, but just crowd surfing this baby away from the edge, trying to save it from this desperate situation and from the cliff and the Colossal Titans coming. But there's a panel of it, like we see just hordes of people just holding their hands up trying to save this baby, and in the background we see all the Colossal Titans marching forward towards them. And I think that's probably one of my favorite panels in Attack on Titan. I don't know, it just hits a certain chord with me. Like there's a lot there that you can kind of read into, but we don't get that at all. We get none of this in the anime. It's completely different. We just see the scenes that I mentioned before about just the Colossal Titans trampling over everybody, but we don't get the scene with the cliffside. We don't get the scene with the baby. Like, and again, I understand that it might be cut for like being too graphic, but again, I'd argue that what they show in Attack on Titan as a whole, and even in this, final special, there's some pretty graphic and messed up things that we see. So it's weird to me that they decided to cut that panel and that whole like scene to get like out as a whole. But and then another one of the final differences that I want to talk about is I've seen that there has been this conversation around the coloring of Eren's jacket. And I know that sounds stupid when you first hear it, but just hear me out. In the anime, we see Eren having a red jacket. We see him having this jacket from season 1. We see it while his mother is getting eaten. Like, he wears that red jacket is his. That's what he primarily wears. Well, when we're getting flashbacks in season 4 and we see the death of Aaron's mother again, and as he's being carried off by Hannes, it's a different color. It's black. And what's even weirder about this is that, going back to the beginning of this special, where we see like the beginning of the series again, Aaron has the red jacket on again. And so I also think that he has the black jacket on in the ending for season 4. And then I think we don't see it all too often, but there's like 2 or 3 different scenes that we see with him having a different colored jacket. And what a lot of people are thinking is that, like, oh, this is a different timeline. This is a different, like, this might be the manga timeline that we're seeing converging with, like, the anime scene, like, ending. Or, not anime ending, but, like, different. Basically, the manga is its own separate timeline. The anime is its own separate timeline. But we're seeing shots of both, and they're being clipped together in a certain way to kind of show us that. And again, I realize that, like, it sounds stupid going off the coloring of a jacket for this, but we have to remember that Attack on Titan really revels in the minor details. No amount of information that we're given is really meaningless. Everything has a purpose. And so I think that if we see a couple of instances where his jacket is black and it's a different color than the red one that we're used to and that he's normally seen with, and I'm 90% sure that in the manga it's also colored black, which is why people think that this is the manga timeline that we're seeing. So it's a little weird to be seeing this different coloration of the jacket along with all these other minor changes that we've seen throughout, like, the series and in specifically season 4. So I do think that it could be an error. It very well could be an error. But I'm more inclined to believe that this was intentional and that this will have some kind of payoff later in the finale. I kind of lean towards the side that maybe this is a different timeline for Eren. Maybe not specifically the manga timeline, but it could be like a little foreshadow for something that's to come. And speaking of different timelines, there's another thing that people have been bringing up, is that Isayama wrote a spin-off manga. I forget what it's called, but it's basically all of the Attack on Titan characters in just a normal, real, like, world without Titans, without, like, they're going to school and they're just living out their daily lives, going to school and being teenagers and stuff like that. Well, we also see in the flash of when Eren connects to paths after his head being blown off by Gabby, we see for a split second the Mikasa and Armin from that school spin-off. And I think that is, like, really telling that we're seeing different timelines, we're seeing different realities. So I do think that to a certain degree we're going to be getting some kind of different timeline convergence. Like, there's a reason why we're being shown these things, and I think that it's also pretty telling that when we see the flashback with Aaron and him going to save Ramsey, that he says in most timelines, or in most cases, it's something to that effect, that I save this kid. So Aaron has already seen like multiple timelines, multiple realities, some where he saves him, and others where he doesn't, but in most he does. So I think we're getting a little information here and there about the possibility of multiple timelines and multiple realities, and this may be the final timeline for Attack on Titan, because Isayama has said, like, the anime is what he considers canon, quote unquote, like that's his actual like canon for Attack on Titan and how everything goes, which I don't want to bring in information outside of the anime for this, but it's just a little bit of where his headspace is at, and obviously, like, Isayama is aware of the backlash that the ending received, and maybe he wants to fine-tune it or change it up just a little bit. Which, speaking of the controversy on the ending, those are pretty much all the differences that I wanted to talk about. Obviously, there's probably some that I missed, and there are things that I probably could also touch on. So if I've missed anything, or you guys have anything to add on to that, let me know in the comments below. I love talking about this type of stuff, and that's part of the reason why I'm doing this. But so to get into is it needed for Attack on Titan to have an anime original ending? And right off the bat, I don't think so. I don't think that Attack on Titan truly needs a completely different ending just because there are people that don't like the ending. And obviously that's all up to personal preference. I don't truly care if you like the ending, don't like the ending. Like, you are entitled to your own opinion. As I said earlier, I have my own small little issues with it, but overall I think that it's a pretty good ending for everything that we've seen. But I don't like the idea of him completely changing the ending just because there was backlash to it and people didn't like it. And on a side note, I find it pretty ironic and hilarious that the anime community, where we've complained about series not getting the proper endings or whatever that they deserve because the mangas weren't finished yet, and now for a series that the manga has ended, and they're trying to adapt the manga and finish it, that people are asking for an anime original ending when we've complained about that happening to series before. So I think that's kind of funny. But regardless of whether you think that we should get an AOE or not, I don't like the idea of writers changing what they have planned just because people don't agree with it or like it or think that they could have done it better or whatever, right? I think that the author should be entitled to have his own vision of the story and be able to show what he wants to show and write whatever he wants to write. If Isayama wanted to end Attack on Titan with the most outrageous, ridiculous thing that comes out of left field, he's entitled to do that. He's the creator. He can do what he wants. Will it satisfy everybody, and will it get a lot more backlash than the already existing ending did? Probably. But he's entitled to make his story whatever he wants. But in that same vein, I think it's also okay for him to tweak things that maybe he wanted to explain more, maybe he wanted to delve into deeper, or what have you. So, personally, I don't want to see an anime original ending. What I would rather see is him kind of giving a little bit more explanation on things, mostly just giving more time to Armin and Aaron's talk in the final chapter. That's my biggest thing, and giving a little bit more explanation about Ymir and what's going on with her. I'd also like to see a little bit more explanation on how Mikasa kind of like inherited her will to a certain degree, or is fulfilling what Ymir wanted to do. And even with me saying that, I think with the ending as it is right now, there is some things that we can like glean from it. We can get a pretty good idea of what's going on if you just kind of like read into the subtext and kind of just think a little bit deeper about it. I know that a lot of people would rather have explanations for kind of everything, but I think it's a little bit more interesting when it's kind of left up to interpretation to a certain degree, but still getting a little bit more explanation on how it all kind of worked would be a little bit better. Now, while saying all of this, if there is going to be an AOE, and to a certain degree I do think that it is going to happen, I don't think that we're going to get a complete rehaul of the ending, but what I do think is going to happen is, given all of these minor changes, these bigger changes, just everything that we've seen in the anime, that Isayama is slightly, not even slightly, he is pointing to multiple timelines and multiple like realities of where things have happened and how things have happened differently. So I think that that is going to come into play with the ending. I don't necessarily know how. I think that that could be a way of explaining why Aaron did some of the things that he did, because he's seen multiple timelines, he's seen the outcome of multiple realities and what's happened, and so maybe this, with all these little changes that may happen, that this will give them the best outcome of what Aaron wants. He wants his friends to live freely and without having to worry about the Titans or Marley or whatever, right? So, and bringing Falco back into this, I do think that to a certain degree that there's a little minor theory that I have that, and I've seen some other people talk about this too, that instead of completely wiping out the Titans and like he did in the manga, I think that, or even if he still does, I think that there's a possibility that Falco actually eats Aaron and gains those memories. Because here's the thing, that we know Titan shifters gain memories of their previous inheritors, right? And obviously, like, nobody can see into the future except for the weird situation that Eren has put himself in while being the founder, being able to see all those memories, but also having the Attack Titan being able to see future memories. And so I think with Falco seeing what's most likely him flying around during the final battle, I think there's a small case to be made that he ends up eating Eren and he becomes like the last Titan or whatever, because I can't recall any other situation where a Titan shifter has gained the access to future memories outside of the Attack Titan with Eren and his dad and Eren Kruger. And again, that's also a special case because of the founding Titan and stuff like that, but you know, the Attack Titan's whole thing is to see future memories. But the line that Falco says doesn't fit anybody else that like he could have gained. Like, it doesn't fit anybody else's memories except for when he's flying around during the final battle. So he's seeing the future to a certain degree. So that makes me think that he's going to inherit the Attack Titan. Again, I don't really think that there needs to be a super big AoE overhaul. I do think that Isayama is going to bring in some newer things and give a little bit more explanation on previous established things from the manga ending, but I just don't see a complete overhaul of the ending. But that's just my opinion. I could be completely wrong, you know. I'm here for the ride. I have loved this series since it came out, and I was super excited to read the ending, and even with all the controversy around it, I still love this series, and I'm excited to see what happens in the final stretch of the anime. So, with that being said, thank you all for listening to my ramble. I know this probably went on for a lot longer than I expected it to, but if you have anything to add, if you want to try and have a discussion, talk about your feelings and where you think the series is going to go at the end, and just overall what's going to happen, make sure you leave a comment below and let's talk. I love talking about this type of stuff, and I am more than willing to have a whole bunch of conversations down in the comment section. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I want to be doing more of this kind of discussion type of content. I like talking about the things that I enjoy and theory crafting, and even if you have a different opinion, I'd love to hear your side of it and what have you. So be sure to leave a like, be sure to comment your thoughts down below, and yeah, thank you all for watching and listening, and I will catch you in the next video. Be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, and I'll talk to you later. Peace.